and gentlemen, would you please rise for the arrival of His Excellency, Governor-General of Canada, accompanied by His Worship, Mayor Lynn Hall, Dr. Daniel Weeks, President of UNBC. What an incredible 2 weeks we have had here on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh and in the city of Prince George. My name is Tracy Somerville. Momentarily we will begin our discussion, but first I would like to introduce Chief Dominic Frederick to welcome us to the traditional territory.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our Lheidli T'enneh and our community, and our elders, and our youth, and our council. And I'm honored to be here with the Governor General and our Mayor Hall, and Daniel Weeks, President for UNBC. And I hope you all have a great morning this morning and have a great day. Thank you.
The closing ceremonies last night were spectacular, and we were honored that His Excellency, the Governor-General, joined us in those celebrations. One might say this morning, just as we have closed one door, saying goodbye to all the visitors who came here, that we are about to open a new door, a new chapter in the life of our community. With a rich understanding of the relationship that exists between the First Nations people of this land, Prince George celebrates its 100th year and the University of Northern British Columbia its 25th. At moments like this, it's critical to both reflect on the past accomplishments and dream of future successes. Today, in our audience, are two people who have received honors from the Governor-General for all of their achievements. Dr. Charles Jago, former president of UNBC and a member of the Order of Canada, and Alex Castley, a graduate of the University of Northern British Columbia, who received the Governor-General's Silver Medal for academic achievement. These two individuals are among many who know the potential of the next 25, 50, 100 years. Today, we want to take some time to reflect on where we're going. Take a look at, if you will, through the open door. And I'm honored to welcome to the stage His Worship, Mayor Lynn Hall, Dr. Daniel Weeks, President of UNBC, and His Excellency David Johnston, Canada's Governor-General. Eminently qualified to speak about the role of the university in the development of a small city, His Excellency David Johnston began his professional career in the Faculty of Law at Queen's University, and then at the University of Toronto. Later, he was to become the Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Western Ontario, Principal and Vice Chancellor of McGill University, and in 1999, he became the 5th President of the University of Waterloo. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, the Governor-General of Canada, David Johnston.
Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, dear friends, what a delight it is to be here with you in this remarkable city of Prince George in this remarkable region of Canada. Quel grand plaisir d'être parmi vous ici, particulièrement aujourd'hui après le grand succès des Jeux d'hiver ici. What a great cause for celebration. Prince George carried off those games magnificently with 4,500 volunteers. I've been asked to speak today about campus community collaboration, And this is really a case of carrying coals to Newcastle. I think you write the book on all of the right things to do with campus community collaboration, but let me add a little contribution. Daniel's urging comes from my last posting, which was as president of the University of Waterloo for 12 years before I assumed my current post 4.5 years ago, and try to pass on some of the lessons that we learned about collaboration there that may have application in other places, but never in precisely the same way. What one learns about good models is that they must be designed for their local setting, taking the local setting into account. Let's go to the next slide, Julie, please. So I used to give a speech called What's in the Water in Waterloo, and one morning, it was about 7:15, I was in Windsor, and I knew it because I hate staying overnight in a community if I don't have to. I travel so much, so there was a snowstorm, and I left Waterloo about 2 a.m. in the morning to get to Windsor. Arrived there about 5:30 in the a.m. and the breakfast, the Chamber of Commerce was at 7:30. So finally on the stage at 7:30, and I began with my title, What's in the Water in Waterloo? And a gentleman from the back says, whiskey! And I said, very good, sir. Joseph Seagram, 1857 Waterloo. He says, no, Hiram Walker, 1856 Windsor. So there's always a little bit of rivalry from one place to another. But that slide shows the Grand River flowing through Waterloo, just as you have the Fraser and subsidiary flowing through here. And the next slide, if we can show that, Julie, is barn raising. This is a Mennonite barn raising. The slide I usually show is an overhead shot, which shows about 100 people, men and women, all helping to raise a neighbor's barn. That was so much part of the culture in Waterloo. My wife and I lived in a farm about 10 minutes drive from the university, and our neighbors were all Mennonite horse and buggy people, and they were barn raisers. If a neighbor's barn burned down, they were there to remove the debris and rebuild it. If someone came new into the community, they were there to build the barn, and that goes back to 1800. And that notion of barn raising, of collaboration, each person bringing to what they could to a particular situation to help the neighbor, is very much the spirit of collaboration that was there in Waterloo. And so then the third slide would be the second slide in the first slide. That is the barn raising right in the middle of the water, in the waterway. That notion of barn raising as part of the metaphor that really informs the community. Let me just begin that with a story. I had been at Waterloo about 5 years. I came in its 43rd anniversary, I think. And on our 50th anniversary, we had a great outdoor barbecue for staff, students, etc. And then at 5 o'clock, we had a reception in our faculty club for all of the elected representatives of the community, local council and mayor, regional government, provincial government, and the federal government. And the remarks I prepared the night before had the theme of this university belongs to this community. And it was an effort for the university to say thank you to those elected representatives who had been one of the numbers of partners that got the university going in the first place and continued it for the decades since to what we thought was quite a successful 50th anniversary. I was just going out to the reception when one of our external relations people said, have you seen the headline in the local newspaper? I said, no, I usually read it in the evening. Well, the headline was, this community belongs to this university. I said, gee, they got it wrong. But I thought about it as I was going up, and I came into the reception, and I said, here's the title of my remarks. Here's the title of the newspaper remarks. Neither is wrong, both are right. The collaboration is very intense and very rich. Next subject, next one. So how did the place begin? Well, it was not unlike the beginning of Prince George and the university here, but there are two versions of this story. One is that the head of the local tire company, BF Goodrich, Ira Needles, was also chair of the Canadian Manufacturers Association 50 years before that, would it be 1956, I guess, and the theme for the CMA that year was Wanted for Canada, 150,000 engineers, 50,000 engineers. And he was giving that speech to the local Rotary Club, Wanted for Canada, 50,000 engineers. And someone put up their hand and say, well, you know, we're a manufacturing center, but we don't have an engineering school. We've got a liberal arts college, started out as a theological college and now liberal arts, Waterloo Lutheran College, but no engineering school. Why don't we start one? And they did. The other version of that story that Jim Prentice tells, who was Minister of Industry for a period of time, came to visit us, and he told the story that his predecessor, Minister of Industry, C.D. Howe, was in Waterloo in 1956, gave a speech to the local Rotary Club, said the theme for the CMA is wanted for Canada, 50,000 engineers. Why don't you people do something about it here? So take your choice of the story, but it began with a very specific need to start an engineering school. It started in the most unglamorous way imaginable. It started as a small faculty from Waterloo Lutheran College, and at that time there were operating grants for startup universities that were secular, that is, were not church affiliated. And Waterloo Lutheran College thought they could have the engineering school and still be governed by the Lutheran Synod, and it turned out they couldn't. So this engineering school with the dean and a few faculty was an orphan. They tried to affiliate with another university down the road and said, we don't want you, we don't meet our standards. And they started with a very interesting concept of education, cooperative education, whereby the students have 8 4-month academic terms and 6 4-month work terms, which they intersperse, and they're paid for the work terms. And the summers are used as teaching or internship terms. And that was considered far too trade-like, and there was questions whether the program would be accredited by the Ontario Professional Engineers. So all of the obstacles were in front of them, but thanks to great leadership, they persevered. And out of that came an engineering school and a co-op program. And if I were to start a university tomorrow, I would insist on co-op, that every student would have work experience as part of their educational development, because they learn that theory and practice go hand in hand, and it's a great way for lifelong education. The other very interesting notion at the start of Waterloo was what we call an intellectual property policy, which is creator owns. That is, the university does not own the intellectual property that the professors, students produce. It's owned by them. Now you say, isn't that what everybody does? No, 99% of the universities in North America vest the property, the patents, etc., produced in the laboratories in the university, and then they usually strike a sharing relationship with professors and students who want to develop commercial companies. And in the United States, it's required under the Bayh-Dole Act. Anytime a US taxpayer dollar goes into university research, university must own the patents, and then they work out their arrangements. Waterloo didn't do that from the start, because the theory was that universities are not very good at commercialization, nor should they try to commercialize, but they should try very hard to create an ecosystem where commercialization can occur very readily. And that has turned out to be a very important feature, at least of the University of Waterloo experience. So those two themes, co-op education, where you have 3,600 employers who are your educational partners in your students' development, and creator-owned IP have been key. Next slide, please, Julie. So some of the milestones, I could choose a zillion, but let me just quickly cover 5 or 6. The next thing that happened about 3 or 4 years later, the engineering faculty was there and was starting to get some respectability, but not much. And then a faculty of science was added, and a faculty of arts, both very small. And Waterloo was like the Hartford of the United States. It was the insurance capital of Canada. A couple of the executives from a local insurance company came up to see the president. We have a problem. We think we are going to lose the insurance industry in this town because we depended upon Scottish actuaries to come and be the professionals. There are only 2 universities that graduate these people, University of Manitoba and Laval, and we no longer can recruit the talent we need. We would like this university to produce some actuarial scientists for us. So the president says, we see the chair of the math department, and I'm sure he'll be happy to direct some of the best graduates to it. No. We want the chair of the math department to do what the faculty of engineering does, and that's have co-op, where the students come in, and in their second term, after the first term, they are on a co-op term, and they have 6 co-op terms with us. And at the end of their 4.5 years, they have most of their qualifications as actuarial science professionals. It's quite a lengthy process. And so that's how co-op migrated from engineering to the next department over, and then it spread throughout the university. So all 6 faculties at Waterloo have co-op opportunities. About 55% of the students do their course through co-op. And all of the faculties have an opportunity of a business minor. So a student can do art history or anthropology, but can do a business minor so they prepare themselves for the business world if they're interested in that. I could go on at length about that little transition, but it symbolizes so many. What happened was a small math department with 3 professors grew in large measure because of this collaboration with the world outside to be the largest faculty of mathematics and computer science in the world. 6,000 faculty of mathematics and computer science at Waterloo today, one of its, I guess, limelight leading faculties. And it occurred because of that collaboration that grew and grew. And of course, the university president, Daniel, said, this math department's getting larger and larger. We can't let it grow this much. It's like a great octopus. But they were so good and so involved in developing math curriculum, going right down to grade 3, that 250,000 Canadian students write the Waterloo Math Achievement Test each year, and in they came. The other thing that happened out of that is universities are always interested in what are their particular programs that are world leading. Well, actuarial science is one of those for Waterloo. Of the 25 books, treatises that are used in the English-speaking world, including the United States, for actuarial science, over half of them are produced by Waterloo professors from this particular department. R&T campus. I arrived in '99. Thanks to those founders, they actually managed to acquire about 1,000 acres of farmland on the outskirts of the city. And people said, how stupid can that be, putting a university out there in the boondocks? Well, of course, the city grew, and we had 500 acres, which was our intensive campus, and then another 500 acres that was just cornfield. And for 20 years, we had been trying to develop that as an R&T park. And we were unsuccessful. And we finally got humble. We'd gotten a little arrogant. Things had gone pretty well with co-op and so on, and industry was developing around. And we expected that multinationals would come because we had real estate. Hewlett-Packard actually bought some land from us and then changed direction, went away. We'd supplied over 10,000 students to IBM at that point in time. We thought IBM loves us. They'll establish a research lab there. Microsoft hires more Waterloo graduates than any other university in the world. Bill Gates visits every 2 or 3 years. Thought Microsoft, of course, will come to us. They didn't need to come to us. And so for 20 years, we could not advance on that R&T park because we thought the multinationals would come in and do it for us. And guess what? They didn't. And guess what? We were selling real estate rather than intellectual talent. So we got humble, and we then went to our local city council and the regional council, said we need some startup money to build the R&T park. To make a long story short, the local city council used sewers, roads money to do some of the surrounding periphery. They then established this is the #1 infrastructure priority for the region, then managed to do that as the one of the high priorities for the province, and then fit it into a federal infrastructure fund, so we had $40 million to build the R&T campus. But we didn't have the tenants. And what happened was, we then got humble and went to local people, and the first 2 tenants were one company called Sybase, then run by John Chen, who currently runs BlackBerry, another story, that had been a Waterloo spin-off company called Watcom. It was the Fortran language, for those of you old computer scientists, that had been developed more effectively by a computer science prof and 5 undergraduate students at Waterloo to become Watt4, instead of Fortran Watt4, then became Watt5, then became Watcom, and that company was commercialized, bought by Sybase. They were the first tenant. The second tenant was OpenText, a company that's fairly prominent today, about 10 billion of capitalization. And they came out of the Waterloo Oxford English Dictionary online project. If I have time, I'll tell you about that because it's a wonderful example of industry-university collaboration. But what the point I'm making of that is we were on a route to failure because we thought the multinationals would save us, and they didn't. It was the local ingenuity, the local development that came and got the R&T park off the ground. Our next hurdle was that we, stay with that for a moment, Julie, was that we had then the capital money for an accelerator center as part of this campus and the investment of funds, but we didn't have any of the operating money, and for every good R&T park in North America, there are 3 or 4 that just don't work, and usually because they don't have sustainability. They start with a capital investment, and 2 or 3 years down the road, they run out of money and they peter out. Well, we faced exactly that issue, and our VP Administration and Finance and Provost both said, we cannot go ahead with this because we don't have a sustainable plan. And I said, gee, I think we have to. We got an investment, we got the R&T park, and I'm a believer of manage, don't do. Do very little. Try to be sure that other people do the hard work. But I became chairman of the board of the Accelerator Center because I thought I better invest some time into it. And again, we went local, and at the very early start, 10 of us put $10,000 each into the Accelerator Center for operating capital. 9 business people, plus I who was chair. And that notion of building from within the community has caused this to be one of the really most successful R&T parks in the world, and all of the indicators are there. But those are the lessons we learned. Local, not multinational, talent, not real estate, sustainability, not simply capital, and community owned, not university owned. The community owns that accelerator center. We now duplicated in three or four other centers, accelerator centers around the Waterloo region, and it's the same formula, not precisely example, but it's community based, and it's that notion of barn raising that is there. And then pharmacy program, medical school. You know all about medical schools. You've done such a great job here. Well, downtown Kitchener was a marvelous industrial flourishing operation until World War II and just after. And from World War II on, it deindustrialized. It lost beer, whiskey, textiles, furniture, footwear, boot, meat. Schneider's closed its last operating plant last week. One by one, all of these industries disappeared. And about 14 years ago, the city of Kitchener said, we have to redevelop our downtown area. They put together a fund. They wanted it focused on high tech. We went to them and they gave us contaminated land, which they cleaned up, plus $30 million to build a school of pharmacy. Many, many hurdles in overcoming that, including the Minister of Higher Education did not want a second school of pharmacy in the province. University of Toronto was the only one, 160 graduates each year in pharmacy, 500 graduates hired each year in Ontario. Where are they coming from? Interesting question. And the only reason we got up to the point where it was considered was because the Minister of Health knew we needed more pharmacists, and we sold them on the basis that we had all of the capital we needed to build the school, the land plus $30 million, and the operating monies would be on the basis of operating tuition students would pay, and operating grants, which would normally go to a science student, chemistry, biology, etc., now into pharmacy, so there'd be no new money into it. And on the basis that it was zero capital cost and zero operating cost to the province, they reluctantly let us go ahead. So I was with the Minister of Higher Education to sign the final agreement, and being a lawyer, I read it carefully before I signed it. It had been approved beforehand, and I noticed after one clause, the university's obligation, a sentence had been added, and the sentence said, and the university commits itself never to request or expect any funds, capital or operating, for this endeavor in perpetuity. And I said to the minister, you don't want a clause like this. First of all, you condemn this place to failure. It's going to, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, it's going to have to need new building or addition, etc. And you can't cut it off entirely from support. Secondly, the only way it would survive is turning private, and your government does not want private institutions in this province. She was a little reluctant. I said, this is something we'll go to the Premier on. And I just added at the column, the right-hand margin letter, on the basis of the project as presently presented, or as presently shown. So we stuck to our bargain, which was no additional money for this project, but of course wanted it to function like any other. But it was just indicative of the hurdles we had to overcome, and there were so many of them, and it worked. When we started the pharmacy school, our local member of provincial parliament, as he was attempting to overcome these hurdles for us, would be met with derision. You want a pharmacy school and you don't have a faculty of medicine? Next thing you want a faculty of medicine. Well, lo and behold, 3 or 4 years later, we obtained a faculty of medicine because Ontario was expanding medical places, and our partner was McMaster, and the basin of patients that they had at McMaster was such that about 100 students coming in was their limit. And so they were looking for a satellite operation, satellite campus. And the only reason they looked at us was because of the invention of the development of the problem-based case approach to medicine that McMaster University had started about, 35 years before that. I was just at the funeral of John Evans, the founder of the McMaster Medical School. John and 2 or 3 other young Toronto professors at age 36 started a medical school based on that method of teaching, small groups, evidence problem-based, etc. And now it's become very popular. My alma mater, Harvard, discovered it about 10 years ago, and they call it the Harvard method. There you are. So I was saying earlier, you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him very much. But, you know, again, that was collaboration of a very intensive kind. What we brought was technology, and what McMaster brought was medicine. And the motivation, what happened there was the regional government gave us $25 million plus additional land in this campus in inner city Kitchener, where ultimately there will be a large teaching hospital and it will be a new hub for that activity. But it was driven by the fact that we had to reinvent ourselves, and we had to do it in a very collaborative way and the collaboration extended to McMaster, who wanted to be part of the technology. We did a similar arrangement with the city of Stratford. Stratford was a railway center until 55, 60 years ago. We went from coal-burning locomotives to diesel locomotives, didn't need that maintenance center anymore. They lost the railway industry, and a local druggist said, okay, let's reinvent ourselves around theater. So we went from amateur to professional theater, built one of the great professional theaters in the world, the Stratford Festival. And so fast forward about 7 or 8 years ago with the Mayor of Stratford, they wanted a university presence, and we brought the technology of the University of Waterloo to the arts of Stratford, and it's a digital media campus. Apple has really been built on the proposition that it's not technology they're selling, but they're bringing the arts and the humanities together into their technology. It's that beautiful combination, that collaboration. So that'll thrive. I put Perimeter Institute and the Institute for Quantum Computing down because my BlackBerry is being charged. I should hold it up at this point of time. Mike Lazaridis was a co-op student in computer and electrical engineering at Waterloo in 1984. Like many of the students, started his own business, his own company in the co-op term, and then came to the end of 4 months and said, we're just getting going, I need an extension. The dean, associate dean said, okay, you got one extension, but then you got to come back. 4 months later, I need another extension. You can't have an extension. So he didn't finish his degree, later became chancellor of the university. But the reason he didn't come back after 8 months is by then he had 3 employees. He said they'd given up good jobs, they'd made a sacrifice. My obligation to them is to stay with them. And out of that came BlackBerry, which has been a great success. And Mike, at age 37 or 38, invested about a third of his net worth at that time. It's now about $350 million. But he's invested in the Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics and then the Institute for Quantum Computing. One theory, the other application. And then around the campus, of course, is all the commercialization. Because you're moving from fundamental research to experimentation, to application, to perfection, and back and forth across that spectrum. And so we have these 2 new institutes and an industry around which, hard to explain, but they work at the subatomic level, the nano level, and they believe that we can push Moore's law out for another 3 or 4 decades. Moore's law says you double the amount of information you can cram on the surface of a semiconductor chip every 18 months, and that's how we've revolutionized computers, the miniaturization, etc. But that runs into physical limits at some point. We reckon in about 15 years. You no longer can keep an electrical charge on a small bit of copper on silicon. It'll spill over. What quantum computing does is it gets inside the atom and calibrates spins there and provides a whole new platform for the pluses and minuses. So you've got a whole host of industries that are coming out of that. BlackBerry's had its decline. We'd like to think it'll come back, and it's interesting with the serendipity. John Chen, who was running Sybase when they were the first tenant on our campus, had brought it out of a tremendous decline back to success. We hope you'll do the same with BlackBerry. We hope it will come back, but you've got around the university this cluster of intensive IT built on very, very intricate and complex collaboration. So watch what happens in Waterloo. Mike calls his new venture capital fund the Quantum Valley Fund, a term we invented when we were speaking about the river going through and the valley, Quantum Valley, on the theory that there's a next wave of technology here that will be based on what happens inside the atom in quantum computing. I could go on that story, but I'll cease and desist. Let's just go to the next slide, please. Okay, what are the lessons we draw? I could stand here for hours just drawing lessons, but they really draw from this notion of intensive collaboration with many different parties bringing something to the ensemble, and it's finding the commonality of interests. And it usually has a degree of visionary quality to it. And in the execution, it's never directly from A to B. It's a lot of different dots that you have to follow with a degree of tolerance and flexibility, but with a very clear strategy of where you want. So I would say you have to develop that clear strategy, but it's based on your local strengths. You look at what it is you do or can do well, draw from them, contribute to them, and develop the synergies from that. It's continuous measurement of how we're doing with a constant view to improvement. I think one has to be very ambitious in that respect. It's good governance. Good governance is so key. We were so lucky from the outset to have good founders, good boards that expected high-quality managers, and those managers in turn would appoint and enthuse and engage great people. On our board, for example, we have 3 mayors. And Lynn, some of my colleagues say, holy smokes, you've got to deal with local politics and university board. Don't you have enough problems? Our 3 mayors have been terrific. They've been part of this collaborative network, not only in bringing their councils to the table, but bringing the community to the table and representing that. All part of this community university. And community alumni ownership. Who owns the university? I mean, nobody owns the university, but when I finished convocation with our students, I asked them a question. I said, who owns this university? Well, nobody owns it, but you're very special stewards of it because you've contributed 3 or 4 years of your life here, and I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope you're the most constructive trustees imaginable over the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. But the community owns it as well. We have come to understand how important learning institutions are in our communities as we have to reinvent ourselves, as downtown Kitchener has reinvented itself. It's happened so many times. And sovereignty in the 21st century will be determined not by the size of your GDP and not how quickly you can amass the largest set of ships in the world, but how well you develop talent, all of the talent in your community, in your country, and how well you use the knowledge of that talent to improve the human condition, beginning with the human condition in your own community. I'm going to stop here because I'm well over my time and we want to share these lessons, but let me just end with my favorite line from Shaw. It may or may not be on the next slide. Yeah. Well, there's a couple of other lessons. Think big, start small, scale up, and be smart all the way. Seek collaboration, local, and then beyond in that order. Local, and then beyond. Remember our mistakes of thinking the multinationals would save our seat on. And then my favorite quote from George Bernard Shaw, some people see things as they are, we dream of things that ought to be, and ask why not. That why not is so key. The first line is really what universities generally do. They're curious, and they develop the curiosity. But this is the next step. We dream, looking forward, of things that ought to be a moral imperative, and ask why not. And so, just a final note, we wanted to move from a model of being government dependent with government operating grants and tuition fees. And so what we did is say, they will be constant, but we would establish ourselves as having the most generous student aid program in the country. The largest portion of our budget is devoted to student aid of any of the universities, even with co-op where the students earn during that time. Because we wanted to say, you're admitted to the University of Waterloo, there be no financial barriers. And we wanted to build out the university, and so we had a major campaign. Our previous 2 campaigns had raised about $60 million each. The one we ran with the Why Not slogan was raised $660 million, so it was 11 times increase in a 10-year period. How did that happen? It wasn't abracadabra. First of all, we invested some money in it. We were spending about $2.5 million on external relations and raising about $8 to $9 million a year. We upped that to about $7 million on external relations and raised $100 million a year. That was our objective, to hit that run rate. And secondly, was to decentralize the alumni relations and fundraising in the university. So every department was responsible, not just the president and 1 or 2 people there with their begging bowl. We have that. But it became owned by every part of the university, and it became owned by the students, etc. I could go on at length about that, but it's just one example in a very practical way of how that collaboration, so rich, is so important to the building of a great university. Let me end now. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Well, there are obvious parallels between Waterloo and the story of UNBC, and the sense of community ownership and connection to our community and faculty and staff and students, and also the potential to draw on the things that we do well. So perhaps I could start with the panelists asking the question really about their first impressions of what we can do to thrive in the future in these partnerships, and really specifically as a small university and a small city. What can we do that no one else can do?
Well, I think the first thing we have to, and thank you for your words, I mean, they do resonate so well with us. I think one of the things that strikes me is that if you look historically, the things that made us great, that made Prince George a place to be 100 years ago, are no different today, really. I mean, some of the issues change, of course. Some of the issues around our economy and what drives that economy, but its location in the north, its strategic location in the north, that's still the same today as it was, way back when this was a fur trading post, and the reason that the railway came here and the confluence of the rivers, all those things are still true today. What we have to do then is take that same advantage that we had back then and transform it into today's opportunities. So our location really, I think, in so many ways drives that opportunity. It drives the economy in the north. It drives so many other things. But I think the key difference for us is, and the Governor General and I spoke about this yesterday, no matter how successful we are in the north in our economic success, no matter how successful we are, we will not live up to our full potential without the development of leadership in the north. We will never become the real potential of this place will never be realized without true leadership. And when you look back, you said it yourself, you look back what happened in Waterloo, that was so much driven by great leaders. And we have outstanding pioneers here in the north that did so much, but we now have to reinvest our educational opportunities around leadership and ensuring that when the economic success is fulfilled, that there is much more to be gained from that economic success than just more ships and those kinds of things. Real true leadership. Mayor?
Well, thank you, President Weeks, and I think, and thank you to the Governor General for your comments. And as a community, it's all about reconnecting and building on these strong relationships and identifying who your stakeholders are. We've got a community that has really changed over the last 25 years, and coincidentally, on the anniversary of the university. We are and will continue to be a forest-driven community. There's no question about that. But if we take a look at what we have actually become over the last number of years, the university has played a huge role in that. We are a university city. There's no question about it. I've said for a very long time, and used the sports adage, if you have an NHL team in your community, you're something. If you have a WHL in your community, you're somebody. If you have a university in your community, you are absolutely somebody, and that is a primary stakeholder in our city. The President and I have had a couple of conversations around how do we tie the university to the city and vice versa. So things that we're trying to achieve need to be tied to the university. Things that they're trying to achieve need to be tied back to the city, and we need to work collectively on those things. If you take a look at what the university has meant to Prince George, it has diversified us not only from a workforce perspective, but we're a multicultural community that we never were before. And as a result of the university, that has played a huge role. Now, I know that every time I single out a particular aspect of our community, you can get into some difficulty. It's not just one entity that's created that, but it's one of the key entities that has created that multicultural and diverse community that we live in. And we need to recognize that. So there's some strengths there that we have to really embody and we have to utilize.
I think you've touched on, there's three real strong components, I think, that the university tries to bring to the community. And I mean the community in the larger sense, of course, the entire north. But really it's resilience, and that's what we always need in order to reinvent ourselves. It's confidence. We will not have investment from other sectors. We will not have the mayor, I know, is working hard to get new industry to come to Prince George. But without that confidence that comes by having great health care and great educational opportunities, we will not grow. And the final thing, which is increasingly more important, and one in which I will very, very directly thank the Governor General for his leadership on, and that's global connectedness. Prince George is no longer, we talk about being the northern capital, and we talk about it being in the north, for the north, and these are all things that were very attractive to me to come here, but we have to be realistic. We need to be a globally connected community, and university plays a critical part of that. Our researchers that are on our campus, our professors, are connected with universities and with research centers across the world. It's striking how many connections we have. All Canadian universities do that. And it's the research that we do that is so important. Like folks, in Canada, all the universities together do about $12 billion worth of research a year. Now, a big chunk of that obviously comes from federal programs and provincial programs. But a significant portion of that work is through community partnerships. That's the key. It really is. So the Global Connectedness part, and the Governor General travels the world, talking about the virtues of the Canadian higher education system. But it's not to go around the world and tell us how wonderful we are. It's really to make people realize we are a receptor. We're a place that people can come and do business. Prince George must be one of those as well, and we're heading in that direction.
If I could, when you touch on the fact that we're in a global economy, every time we have a potential investor come to our community and take a look at the amenities that we have, and we have many of them, we need to keep in the back of our mind that we are in a competitive business, no matter what we're trying to sell. I spent 10 years on the school board and have, through my entire tenure, talked about the competitiveness of education. So it's not isolated from that world competitive piece that we're looking at. And I think the best formula for failure is not to identify and recognize and partner with your key stakeholders in your community.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as we thought about where we are right now at this 25-year mark, certainly with UNBC, we talked a lot over the years about growth, about the idea that we're going to grow, the city's going to grow, the university is going to grow, and well, we really haven't seen that. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that idea. What does it mean? What does it mean to be who we are at this size, at this place right now? How do we move forward? Do we worry about growth? How will we measure success without it?
Well, it's just too easy. I feel teed up on that one. It really is growth. There's only one measure, that we use, and that's student numbers, and it's such an arbitrary number. And again, even in Canada, we divide up our universities in terms of some measure of quality has something to do with the number of students that we have. And that's just absurd. I've made the case, I don't know how many times, that if Princeton was in Canada, it wouldn't be part of the U15. Doesn't have a medical school, and there's not enough students. I mean, this makes no sense whatsoever. The size in that issue is not relevant. Perhaps UNBC is too large. I don't know. We haven't really wrestled with that question significantly, and it's a question we're going to have to come to grips with very, very soon. But growth can mean much, much more than just student numbers. It's growth in what we do. We're world-renowned, world-class in certain areas of research, in environmental science, sustainability. These are the things that we excel at. But we have to excel at other things as well. Again, if you tie it back to what I said about really being successful here in the North. I mean, this is a question that I often put out when I talk about these kind of things, and it's ironic I have the former president of Waterloo here, but I often say, do folks know what the largest faculty is at the University of Waterloo? And you can't answer because I know you know. But many people would think it's math or it's computer science. It's not. It's the Faculty of Arts. The Faculty of Arts at Waterloo is the largest faculty. That tells you something about the importance of what we do in the totality of the education of our students. And I think that's critical for us here too. So measurement is, the growth thing is much more complex than just student numbers.
Well, what does it tell us?
Oh, it tells us that indeed, I think I recently put out, so the most followed thing I put out on Twitter in the last few weeks was an article that said we don't need more STEM students, we need STEM students that have a liberal arts education. Something to that effect. And I think, again, that's really critical in the success of the North. I am so excited, for example, in our new Wood Innovation Center that we now have Emily Carr coming in to be our partner. This is truly the way in which you promote innovation. We're going to put students in there together that are doing industrial design and wood design along with the students in our programs in wood engineering, and good things will come out of that. You can't orchestrate that. You can't make that happen. Now, as successful as Waterloo is, I mean, it's a tremendous success and something that Canada is extraordinarily proud of. But to try, as the Governor General said, it was a local phenomenon. It happened locally, and people have been trying to recreate this around the world to no success. Really, it can't be recreated just anywhere else. It has to go with the local opportunities that we have. So again, I go back to the things that made Prince George a place to live and grow and develop 100 years ago are still true today. It's where we are and the opportunities that are right outside our door.
Tracy, I'd say a couple things about growth. I agree with Daniel's view. And just to put it in business terms, if you're running a business, you may be pretty concerned about your top line, but you're most concerned about your bottom line. And businesses get into a lot of difficulty when they become obsessed with their top line, their gross revenue, and forget about the expenditure side and the bottom line. In fact, one of the great innovations in history has been double entry bookkeeping, where you're keeping track of top line and bottom line very carefully because you monitor expenses. So that's one thing. Number two, we've got a problem in Canada, and that is our operating incentives tend to produce growth, tend to require growth. It's very difficult for a university of, I'm not sure the number, but it's probably less than $10,000, 10,000 students, to have the economies of scale necessary to mount the programs. And if we want to have a more diverse higher education system, and I think we want to, we have to find better ways of not having the main driver of funding being growing numbers. We have to have funding that encourages diversity, and through diversity, much greater quality. Thirdly, I would say that even a university as large as the University of Toronto, 80,000 students, should not try to have all programs and all subjects. And in a given program, should not try to cover all subdisciplines. One of the great departments in McGill when I was there was anthropology. And if there are 21 subdisciplines in anthropology, there might be more or less, they said, well, we'll cover 21 in terms of our survey courses, but we'll only specialize in 3. We'll only do graduate work in those 3 areas, and we'll do it very well. I think that's a very important prescription for success, that you identify the particular strengths and grow around those. Fourthly, don't get mesmerized by any particular formula, and Daniel's just made that point very well. That little story about the Department of Mathematics for 3 people, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the president saying, gosh, they're getting too large. Well, they couldn't be resisted because they were so good in terms of their quality, and what they were doing was revolutionizing the teaching of mathematics in the country. The 3 professors in that department, 2 of them earned their PhDs while they were university lecturers, had been high school teachers, the other one had as well. And when everybody in the university, the other professors, the kids come to us doing math and science courses, they don't know any math, they don't know any science. We've got wretched high schools and wretched primary schools in this country. These 3 folks would say, well, don't you understand? Most of the people teaching math and science in our primary schools, and very often our high schools, don't know any math or science. They've done a degree in English or philosophy, whatever. And then the principal said, I need a grade 10 physics teacher and a grade 9 math teacher, you're it. So they worked with these people to develop their teaching skills, and then they developed the enriched curriculum for the really good students, and in that way helped to revolutionize the teaching of math and did a better job of math generally in the country. And so even on the area of professional service and outreach, the president couldn't say, you math folks are getting too big for your britches. So there's a lesson there as well. But I would say growth is not it. Certainly the strategy of identifying your strengths, working very hard at quality, and allowing those areas that have the excellence to flourish. Princeton, of course, has the largest endowment per student of any university, I think, in the world. Harvard's endowment is $36 billion. It's about 3 times the size of Princeton. Princeton is about $18 billion. So on a per student basis, it has, when I last looked at these things, it had about $100,000 of endowment for each student that was entered. And that's how it and so many of the US universities have made small institutions work. They've been very dependent upon private sector support and have not had to be dependent upon government support as we do in our public system here.
Thanks, Tracy. And as a community, we talk often about growth, and we talk about what it means to enlarge our population. And there's a belief out there that if we enlarge the population, we enlarge the tax base. And there's no question, there's some of that. So if you enlarge the tax base, the prevalent thought is you're going to do better in your community. We were talking about growth not long ago around what does it mean from an industrial or commercial perspective, or the business, the mom and pop business downtown. And then somebody said, what about prosperity? I don't believe prosperity is necessarily tied to growth. And I think the Governor General and President Weeks have touched on it. Prosperity in a community needs to be viewed from what we offer in the community. And as you say, Governor General, when we build on our strengths, that's a big part of prosperity. So I tie the 2 together. And if you talk about prosperity in the sense of a post-secondary institution, UNBC, any other post-secondary institutions around the country, it is about what you offer. It is about meeting the needs of the community, and in this case, it's about meeting the needs of the region. So for me, it would be, if I put on my tax hat and think about what it means to the community, sure, growth has certainly some potential. But I think we have to focus in on the prosperity piece. And prosperity doesn't always mean how much money you have in your pocket. It's about what you offer your community, what you provide your community. And that's from all of the stakeholders, just not one.
So with that in mind, as we start to think about, how we can create these partnerships and work toward more of them without getting prescriptive around research, because obviously that's an issue at universities. But how do we find those things that we can connect with? How can we look at what we have in Prince George? Or have you already got ideas? Do you know where you would like to see us go?
Well, absolutely. And I think, as I said earlier, you're sitting beside a couple fellows, and I'm not sure about the Governor General, but we don't have a lot of patience, is what we found out as a common trait. We like to throw things on the table, have discussion, and unfortunately, if I talk about it this afternoon, I want it to happen tomorrow morning. But I'm learning that sometimes that just isn't the case. I think that the key, and I talked about it a couple minutes ago, was around that stakeholder partnership and what it means to our city. And whenever I refer to the university, we talk about it from a regional perspective, because I think there's growth and opportunity outside of Prince George, and we tie ourselves to the university. We talk about it, talk about our city being the hub. We're located centrally in the province. That's a big thing for us, and we need to, I think, enhance that and deliver the message on a greater scale than we do right now when it comes to what we can offer the entire region. So, from my perspective, when you look at what we have to offer, how we can connect, we absolutely need to strive to connect to these major institutions in our city. And I talk about the airport quite often. I talk about what we're doing at the University Hospital. So these are major stakeholders that are going to play a real role in our development.
The first public talk I gave was for the provincial budget committee that travels around the provinces several months ago now. And when it was my turn to get up, I had Angela Keller with us, our president of our student association, also spoke with me. And I started by telling the budget committee, I said, please listen to everybody in this room. I knew that the art gallery was coming up next. I think the symphony was talking as well to the budget committee. And I said, please listen to every one of these people and do what you can for them. Because what's good for them is good for me. And at the end, one of the people on the panel said, so you're not asking me for anything? You don't need any money? I said, well, of course I am. I need things, but they said, well, your other colleagues at the other universities, they give us a long list of things that they need. And I said, well, then you know what the list is. It's not any different. I mean, I'm just here to tell you that what's good for this city and the people in it is good for this university. And what's good for this university is good for this city. And I think if we start there and have one single message about that, I think that's the beginning of identifying the kinds of things that we have to do together.
Tracy, I'd say 3 or 4 things very quickly on this subject of how you develop the collaboration. Number one, God gave us one mouth and 2 ears for a reason. The sensory devices for listening are twice as powerful, we like to think, as the transmission and the communication. Once you do a lot of listening and seek listening. Number 2, even more so at Waterloo than McGill, I would spend anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of my time external to the university, and that's the opposite of what most people would do in these positions. But I would each year meet with the executive committee of the board. We'd have our university objectives, and I'd have my own objectives, which I'd set out for them, and I'd evaluate myself on the past year, and they would evaluate me. And then I'd have a chart of how I spent my time, divided fairly discreetly, so that they understood where I was investing time and energy. And I said, I want you to own that, and I want you to be entirely comfortable, because it's quite wonky with that degree of time externally. Why do I do that? And why do I encourage our deans and others to do that? Because our greatest danger is complacency. Our greatest danger is becoming too isolated, and we need a number of people who are constantly out there with their ears wide open, listening, learning, always asking, who is doing this better than we are, and how do I bring that back into the institution? And I guess that really leads to a sense of humility, that you don't know it all. And as we got into difficulty from time to time in Waterloo, it was in part by the fact that we began thinking that we were pretty good and forgot that we were in that constant journey, and there were a whole lot of others doing things better than we were that we had to learn from. The final thing I would say, and this is for Canada, is how important it is for us to be outward looking, particularly in higher education. Only 3.5% of our students actually spend a term abroad. That's really is woeful for a country like Canada. We have far too little domestic mobility across the country. Daniel and I were talking about that. A great 150th anniversary 2017 project would be to do an enormous step forward in having young people move across this country and around the world. I've watched my children, 5 daughters, and I say to no one is to know none. From age 12, they've begun international exchanges, and 3 distinctive things happen in their development. First of all, curiosity is natural in children. They're always asking why, but their curiosity becomes enhanced by exposure to difference. The second thing that happens is they become not only more curious, but they become more tolerant in the very positive sense of that word, that they're interested in difference, and they find it very enriching to be exposed to different cultures, especially learning different languages, and therefore simply embracing a wider sphere of activity and interest. And thirdly, their judgment becomes better, because they don't come with preconceived ideas. They don't jump to the first conclusion. They're looking for the broader base of evidence. And so I would say for our universities in Canada, our greatest danger is complacency. And the opportunity that is clearest and easiest for us is to become much more international, because you learn from that diversity. And you also learn that the Asian world is advancing much more quickly than we in the North American and Western world are. Finally, I quote often a book by James Robinson and Darren Acemoglu called Why Nations Fail, or Why Societies Fail. And their thesis is that those societies that are inclusive in their economics and their politics are on a virtual upward spiral. And those that are extractive in their economics and their politics are in a descending spiral. And so our challenge in Canada is to continue that inclusivity and to be wide-reaching in terms of embracing the world and embracing change as our friend. And our destiny, I think, is to be the Athens to the new Romes, and to get really busy about being an Athens that draws from and extends our education and knowledge to every corner of the world and takes from it.
Well, I want to be the Athens to the Lower Mainland, I think, would be the, because the parallel. But the parallel is striking. I mean, we know that the challenge for us to get students to come to UNBC, it really is just getting them to visit us. If they come and have a visit, our ability to convert them into students is astronomical. There again is exactly why the mayor and I talk about how we must work together to make Prince George a destination, for students to come. I think that's it. We're doing, the city's doing everything. I think they're knocking it out of the park in terms of the quality of this community. The university is an extraordinary university, extraordinary faculty, extraordinary staff. Really, I think it's working together. I'm so pleased that the mayor is, maybe he'll tell us about it, but he started an educational committee as part of his council, and I think this is the first step in us working together to make this a destination, a university community in the truest sense.
Well, let me talk about that.
Okay.
I've just gone through a recent journey, and here I am, and during the journey I talked about educational committees, and for me, I have a long background, and the decade I spent with the school district was immeasurable for me. And I think when we take a look at how we want to connect to the university, those education committees were key. So one of them I refer to as the Business Education Committee, which Councillor Kohler is chairing. And the partnership there is with the UNBC, with the College of New Caledonia and School District 57. And I just said to Todd in the lobby that in order for us to retain students, we need School District 57 as a key partner. It's bringing those students in School District 57 out to visit our post-secondary institutions and give them a flavor of what the life is like. And from the age of 12, I had the opportunity to take my twin daughters up to UNBC. And lo and behold, they're going into their 5th year next year. And that was as a result of really immersing them in that life. The other committee that we struck was a committee that I call the Student Committee around the education piece, which Councillor Merrick is chairing. And again, the same 3 partners, but we're now looking at students' needs. We were told loud and clear over the last year that students require specific things if they're considering Prince George. One of them, transportation. What does that look like in our community? And the other thing is housing. And then some of the secondary issues that they take a look at is, what does the city have to offer me from an arts and cultural perspective? What does it have to offer me downtown? So we've got a tremendous amount of work to do within those 2 committees and within our worlds. And how do we attract those students? And how do we show them that this city is truly a university city? And we need to make sure then that we provide those amenities for those students, because that's key to their decision making. And I go back to what I said earlier, it's a competitive business.
And speaking about students, tell the story please to the audience here about the extraordinary philanthropy of your students reaching out to Winnipeg and handing over the flag for the next Winter Games.
Yeah, we were so proud of our students who worked to raise funds so that there would be free transportation. And they partnered with the city as well, bus transportation throughout the games. And as it turned out, they were so effective that they in fact raised a little bit more money than they needed. And they came to my office saying, well, what should we do with that money? And they had an idea and wondered if it was just too crazy. But they wanted to take that money and give it to the new team in Winnipeg, so that Winnipeg would also then try to do something similar around sustainability and reducing the carbon impact of the games. And I thought it was a tremendous idea, and that's exactly what our students have done. It was a teachable moment for us at the university to teach them really the true spirit of philanthropy and giving. And so really they taught themselves really, and they taught us something, I think, in some ways. So it was a really truly incredible opportunity for them to demonstrate the very kind of leadership that I spoke about at the beginning. This is what we need to be successful in the North. The economy will wax and wane. There'll be new economic opportunities, whether it's LNG or something else in the future. These will come, they will be successful, or they will not, and other things will happen. But without young leadership emerging in the North here, we will not achieve our preferred future. And I strongly believe that.
Tracy, if I could just comment on President Week's group from the university. When they presented to us, it was an eye-opener. It was refreshing. It was new ideas coming to the table with no boundaries. And that's what's so refreshing when we see these students come before council and talk about initiatives that they want to put forward. We said to them afterwards, you come to us tonight, we agree with you 100%, we're going to support you in this endeavor, but we want you to remember one thing, keep coming back to us. This is not your last innovative idea that you want us to participate in. So I'm hoping to see them at the table a lot more often.
Well, I can say that as a faculty member, I'm consistently proud of our students. They always go above and beyond what we expect. So on that note, I think we're coming close to the end of our session, but I do want to give you all a few minutes just so we can really sum up. Where are we going? Where are we going? Tomorrow morning, let's go. Where are we going? A couple of things that you'd like to leave us with as a community, faculty. What can we do to connect the city, the region, and the university, and the country?
I'll just briefly say, the things that the mayor has pointed out around our working together. I look forward to our planning a joint trip to Victoria and work as a community, both as a university and a city council, to really articulate the needs here in the North and in Prince George. I think that's a key item. The two things that are most pressing on my table in the very, very near future is to reorganize our opportunities for First Nation students on our campus and the leadership that we have around First Nations. I think we've done a good job, but there's so much more we could do. It's not good enough, and that is very, very pressing on my table. And the other piece is around, I'll leave you with where I began, it's around student leadership. And stay tuned for some announcements around some new initiatives around student leadership on our campus. I really so strongly believe that it is precisely what the North needs going forward.
Thanks, Tracy. Well, I think we've gone through 2 weeks that have proven to us how important it is to have partnerships and stakeholder connections. I don't think you can argue the 2 weeks that we've just realized and the importance of what it means to this community. A couple things on our list. Certainly the Chief is here today, and our partnership has been growing and flourishing over the last couple of years, and I think that that is really key to us. We're hoping to get into conversation with the Clyde Tenay around business opportunities, economic development opportunities. I think that's the next piece of the relationship. The other piece, I think, for me around initiatives that the city are looking at from a student perspective and a university perspective is how do we draw students into our downtown? How do we provide housing for those students? How do we ensure that Emily Carr is a success? I'd love to see housing opportunities for students right next door to the Winnick building, quite honestly. I think that would be a prime location, and that's really a key for us. And I think it's just building on those necessary relationships, particularly as we've talked about this morning with the university. And what we strive to do as a city, we need to connect the university to our journey as well.
Tracy, I'd say 2 things about where do we go. My installation remarks, 4.5 years ago, the title was A Smart and Caring Country, A Call to Service. And both of those adjectives are key, smart and caring. You build a smart and caring country with smart and caring communities. And so my first observation would be, how do we get the story of Prince George across the country as a remarkable way of integrating smart and caring and building prosperous, healthy communities where life shall be better for our children than they were for our generation or the previous generation. And that's the second observation. I think this country, we probably worked harder at equality of opportunity than perhaps any other society in the world. And the challenge is to have both equality of opportunity and excellence too, to mutually reinforce one another. But I leave you with a cautious note. I worry most about complacency. We are such a fortunate country, as I was saying to Daniel earlier. When I travel around the world, I talk about our challenges, and people say to me, well, Canada's a solution in search of a problem. In many ways that's true, but we do have some problems, and we do have, because of our delightful situation in this bountiful land, sometimes a tendency just to relax a little bit. One of the slides I use is an OECD, Organization for Economic and Cooperation Development, analysis, 32 countries in the OECD, and they're looking at mobility and equality of opportunity on the basis of the degree to which children meet or exceed their parents' level of education as an indicator of upward mobility. They divide the populations of each of the 32 countries into 5 segments, quintiles. Guess what? In the top 4 quintiles, the top 80%, Canada leads that index. Our children reach or exceed the level of education of their parents to a higher degree than any other country in the survey. So you think now the bottom 20%, we're going to be up there, top 1, 2, 3, wouldn't you think? We're in the bottom third. So we've got some big holes, and one is Aboriginal First Nations education, a problem that has gone on far, far, far too long, and it's time to change that. But there are other segments of our population where that doesn't occur. With most of our immigrant groups, they're at the upper end of that scale. The children of incoming people exceed their parents, but there are certain segments of our immigrant group where it's quite the opposite. And those are challenges that I think we have to get at, and those of us involved in education have a particular responsibility. But the caution I would have is that of complacency and taking too much for granted, and not asking Shaw's comment often enough. We dream of things that ought to be an ask why not.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking our panel today for this wonderful discussion.